The latest World Inequality Report is out, and, well, the picture it paints is pretty staggering. So today, we're going to dive into the key findings. We'll look at the massive divide in our world, how we even got here, and maybe most importantly, what the report says we can do about it.
Let's just kick things off with one number that really frames this whole conversation: 3x. The report found that a very, very small group of the world's wealthiest people now hold 3 times more wealth than the entire bottom half of humanity. Just think about that. That's the wealth of over 4 billion people on one side of the scale and just a handful of multimillionaires on the other.
A number like that, it just makes you stop and think, right? What does a gap that big actually mean for people's lives every day? And what kind of systems are in place that even allow it to happen? That's exactly what we're going to break down.
All right, first things first. Let's try to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this. Just how wide is the gap between the ultra-rich and, well, everyone else?
To make this less of an abstract number, the report gives us this incredible visual. Picture a football stadium, right? You could fit the entire global top 0.001%, that's all 56,000 of them, right inside. The amount of financial power concentrated in that one stadium is just almost impossible to comprehend.
And here's the kicker. This gap isn't just wide, it's getting wider and faster. As you can see here, since the 1990s, the wealth of the super rich has been growing at almost double the rate of the bottom 50%. So they're not just pulling ahead, the distance between them and the rest of the world is literally accelerating every year.
Now, this massive pileup of wealth at the top isn't just about abstract numbers on a screen. It has a really profound human side to it. And to see it, we have to look at how inequality shows up in our daily work. Who's actually doing the work, and how do we as society value it?
Okay, so to get the real picture of the world's workload, we have to talk about something our economy often just ignores: unpaid labor. I'm talking about childcare, household chores, you name it. When you actually count that work, the report shows that women are performing 55% of all labor hours across the globe. They are literally doing the majority of the world's work.
Which leads to a pretty logical question, doesn't it? If women are putting in more total hours of labor, does their income reflect that?
The answer is a huge no. On the left here, you see the pay gap we usually talk about. Women earning about 61 cents for every dollar a man makes in paid work. But now look to the right. When you factor in all that unpaid work, a woman's effective hourly income plummets to just 32% of a man's. The report calls this the double burden. You're doing more work for far, far less reward.
Okay, so let's zoom back out. Because these kinds of inequalities, they don't just happen in a vacuum. They are often built right into the architecture of our global financial system.
The report points to this key concept they call exorbitant privilege. In simple terms, it means wealthy countries can borrow money really cheap at low interest rates and then turn around and invest that same money in developing countries where they get a much higher return. This creates a system where wealth is systematically pulled from poorer nations to richer ones.
And this chart shows you the real-world cost of that privilege. For the bottom 80% of countries, the amount of money flowing out of their economies, that's that blue bar, is often as much as, and sometimes even more than, what they're able to spend on crucial things like healthcare and education for their own citizens.
So this whole financial setup becomes this huge roadblock to development. It's draining the very resources that could be used to build schools, hospitals, and infrastructure, which basically locks in this cycle of global inequality.
And this brings us to what might be the most powerful argument in the whole report. The inequalities we've been looking at, they aren't some natural law of economics. They're the results of specific choices, policies, and how political power is distributed.
It's no surprise that this economic power translates directly into political influence. The data shows that political donations are overwhelmingly from the wealthiest citizens. In places like France and South Korea, the top 10% of earners are providing the majority of all political funding. That gives them a much, much louder voice when it comes to shaping policy.
And you can see this influence in who actually ends up governing. While working-class people make up more than half the population, they hold fewer than 10% of the seats in the parliaments of many Western democracies. This creates this huge gap between the real lives of most people and the people elected to represent them.
The report's own foreword puts it perfectly. Inequality is not destiny, but choice. And if it's a choice, that means we can choose differently.
So what would those different choices actually look like? Well, the last part of the report isn't just about problems. It lays out a pretty clear set of policies that could start to turn the ship around.
The report provides a real roadmap here. We're talking about major public investments in things like education and healthcare, creating tax systems that are actually fair, where the wealthy contribute their share, adopting policies that finally value all that unpaid work, and holding capital owners accountable for their climate impact.
And to show this isn't just wishful thinking, they put a number on it. $250 billion, that's how much potential annual revenue the report figures could be raised for these kinds of public investments.
And where would that money come from? It's from just one very targeted idea: a 2% minimum tax on the fortunes of the world's roughly 3,000 billionaires. It just goes to show that a small change at the very, very top could free up massive resources for everyone else.
So the ultimate message here isn't one of despair. It's actually one of possibility. Yes, the problems are huge, but the solutions, the tools we need to fix them, are well understood and they're within our reach.
What it really boils down to, what's been missing, is the political will to actually use those tools and the global cooperation to make sure that changes stick in our interconnected world.
And that brings us right back to the beginning. The report lays out all the evidence and gives us the options. It leaves us with one last really powerful question. If inequality is in fact a choice, what choice are we going to make?